Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking spacers. Now there are many different types of spacers. We have carburetor and throttle body spacers. Now you have different materials: aluminum, phenolic, and plastic. And there used to be wood, but you don't see that around much anymore. Phenolic and plastic are great heat insulators. Aluminum's a lot more common. Now for carburetors, you usually have an open and a 4-hole, then you have 4-hole taper. Throttle body injected, you have kind of the same thing except for usually 2-hole or an open. And then for later model motors where you have injection in the later side of the intake or in the heads, the spacer goes right behind the throttle body to the intake, and it just basically increases runner length, which increases torque. Now in the carburetor, your 4-hole spacer usually is designed to increase your torque and mixture a little bit, especially the tapered when using on a single plane. And the same thing with the throttle body and a carburetor, throttle body injected, is that an open spacer is going to basically increase your mid and top range horsepower and torque. It can move the curve, or if you're running something like a big single plane intake, don't really want to change it, you can drop a taper on there and kind of bring your torque curve a little bit down a little bit. Or if you're running a dual plane, you need a little more top end, you can run an open spacer, kind of pick up the torque curve in the mid to top range. Now each spacer is designed for a specific purpose, and it's tuning basically is what it comes down to. So you need to look at a lot of things for picking a carburetor spacer, like what you're already running, your gears, what are you planning to do with the vehicle, etc. Because something like this right here, this is my daily driver, and there's a video on this one I modified that y'all can watch, so I won't go in depth on it. Basically it's a 4-hole helix power tire for a quadrijet. Now it's sitting on top of a Performer RPM Q-Jet. So what this 4-hole spacer did was basically just increase my runner length for increased low end torque, which basically this motor stays in the low end most of the time because all I do is street drive it, go pick up parts, go to work. It might see the highway, but it never runs over 1800 on the highway. So I mean, most of the time, most of the driving is always under 2000 RPM. So that spacer was a good choice for that. And I will show you the other motor I have where I use a RPM air gap style with a single 1-inch open spacer, and explain to you why I chose that on that motor specifically. So basically what it comes down to, you want to determine what you're running and what's best for your application. And they also come in different heights for carburetors and throttle body injection, because you have hood clearance issue on many vehicles. Now on a truck like this, I could probably run an even bigger spacer, but I don't really need it. Now on a lot of cars, you probably can't get away with running a spacer unless you got a modified hood. Okay, so on this motor, we have a 1-inch open spacer. Now the reason for that is because I switched over from a high-rise single plane intake to a what is basically a Performer RPM air gap. Now the reason I swapped intakes originally was because this is no longer a drag truck, it's going to go on the street. So I wanted something a little bit more streetable, but also at the same time, if I ran it, I still get a little bit of top end out of it, even though I'm not going to be shifting it as high as anymore. Taking it down from basically a 7200 RPM shift to something more like a 68. So with the nature of this cam and the rear gear ratio, it was a better option for me to go to a dual plane with the longer runners for increased torque, so I can be a little more street friendly. And then the 1-inch open spacer, that way when I want to play, I got that mid-range power. Because odds are, now we're going to test the heat theory. We're getting both these motors up to about 185 degrees where the thermostat opens up, and then we're going to check the carburetors to see if the spacers help or not. It's really about the same. So now if we use one of the other two types of spacers instead of aluminum, it may have made more of a difference. But since both of these carburetors have a heat insulator gasket and they're both sitting on aluminum, they're about the same. As far as the aluminum spacer compared to not using aluminum spacer for heat reasons, it really makes no difference if you're using a heat insulator gasket. Now switching to the two other materials may actually help if you really need to cool off your carburetor for any reason. Now, I hope all this information was helpful to all you, and as always, thanks for watching.